Hello, everyone, and welcome to Dynamic Character Productions' weekly recap of our fifth mini, Trinity Falls. I'm your host, Jon Millsip, and I am joined this week by fellow Exile Island alum and primary game designer for Trinity Falls, Greg Langstine. How are you doing, Greg?
Doing great. It's a nice early morning here on Sunday, especially for you, Jon. Thank you for getting up with me. I'm really excited to talk about this season. For me, I'm like overall with the season, I'm really enjoying it because this is since joining production, this is the first season that I didn't actually get to watch live. So it's just fun to actually get to know the people with everyone else watching along with the season. And I'm really enjoying it. Everyone's really like bringing it and excited to talk about it, especially these top two votes at the merge, because I think they were fun and really set up the rest of the game.
Yeah, we definitely have some exciting things happening this week. So let's dive right into it. We start our first episode off with Vee breaking down how that last tribal went for her tribe. Lydia saying the phrase that Vee had and had told everyone she had to claim the idol, play it on herself, ends up negating 4 votes, sending Jonathan home.
Mm-hmm.
And we're just really seeing from Vee here this excitement for Lydia's play.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Vee doesn't seem to be upset about the fact that Lydia got this idol first, that she had told everyone on the tribe about. She had had conversations with Lydia about having this phrase. Lydia didn't mention also having the phrase, but she still just is super hyped that Lydia managed to save herself here, and that she discusses how her plan of just talking about this idol phrase made it so people didn't want to vote her in case she did have this idol.
Right. Yeah, and I thought it was really interesting. Vee's reaction to Lydia saying the phrase was really subtle, but like I rewatched that scene a couple of times, and you probably talked about this last week. But like you could see Vee just kind of like perk up a little bit, but it was almost like she was watching it as a fan, like watching this all go down, and then Lydia saving herself, and she was just like, that was really cool. Instead of being like she took my idol, like that could have been mine, which like she might need coming down the road, but like. Thankfully, she didn't, and Lydia played it well, and I then managed to pick up another one.
Yeah, we'll get to that a little bit later, but we then have Sarah's perspective of the other tribe's vote. She's really happy with the outcome because it really gave her an idea of who she could trust. She's a bit shocked Emily ended up voting for her. We, as the audience, know why Emily ended up voting for her.
Mm-hmm.
But the big thing here is Sarah's really justifying not using her idol nullifier in this position because she felt that whatever happened, like Austin was going to be getting the other votes, and right. She didn't feel like she was in any danger here. I think this was a really smart play from her in this instance because that idol nullifier gets more powerful the further into the game you get. So saving it here because you know you're at such little risk of going home, it just really shows some astute gameplay from Sarah in a situation where she seems to be in a tighter space than we had seen her previously.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it didn't seem like there was any bad blood brought between her not playing the idol nullifier between her and Austin. It still seems like that Tugela group is still pretty tight. They're still working together. So I was wondering if maybe she could have lied and said that she had played it, and that it just because there was no idol, it didn't come into play, and she could kind of like get the heat off of her for having anything and use it as a way to say, "Oh, Austin, I played my idol nullifier in an attempt to make sure you were safe, but she didn't really need to." So you know, I feel like in games like this, it's like you kind of think that you need to do more than you need to, but it's actually better if you don't. Just because why not? Like why? Like, you know, why have to like make another lie if well, I mean, some people kind of like doing it that way, but I don't know, the way I would play it, and I think the way that Sarah's playing it is like you don't have to be extra, basically.
It really does show a lot of restraint because sometimes these advantages can kind of burn a hole in your pocket.
Yeah.
Especially in a situation like this where it's the person you're trying to vote out literally says beforehand that they are using an idol.
Yeah.
So it showed a lot of control from Sarah not to use it here. We then get a bit of a conversation from Lo, just saying she feels like she's been a little too hot. She needs to cool down a bit. And start just kind of playing a little bit more in the background to like ease off some of the attention she's getting.
Yeah, I think it's a good read.
Yeah. But we get together for the first challenge, and what do you have it? We are now merged. We are now looking at the Nokalakai tribe, and this first merge challenge is just so interesting. It's top or bottom, and in this challenge, the Castaways have a choice to compete for immunity or for an advantage. One's going to be using their head, the top portion of the challenge, and one's going to be using their feet, the bottom portion of the challenge. So those competing for immunity are going to have to build a 4-story cup pyramid, so a 4-3-2-1 pyramid, place one die on top of that top cup, and then a ping pong ball on top of that die using only their feet. And to make things more complicated, all of those solo cups, those 10 cups they're using to build this pyramid, they have to start in a single stack. So they have to be a little dexterous with their feet there to pull these apart so that they can properly stack them. On the other side of the challenge, those competing for an advantage have to solve a Scrabble-like puzzle. So they're given a grid, and they have to put all of the season names and this season's tribe names on this grid so that they're overlapping and that everything makes sense, the connections, like a game of Scrabble. And they have to do this before the challenge, the immunity side of the challenge is complete. So in order to show which part of the challenge the competitors want to compete in, they have to reveal a card. Black means immunity, red is advantage. So everyone's given their moment. They grab their card. They all show. We have Sarah, Ben, Lex, Jon, Emily, and Luke competing for immunity, and Austin, Lo, Vee, and Lydia playing for an advantage. Greg, what would you do in this situation?
Oh man, the advantage is really, enticing, but I think I compete for immunity for a couple of reasons. One, it's the merge. You really don't know what's going to happen. I feel like it's always better to go for safety. And then plus, if you're like openly competing for an advantage and everyone knows that you could then have it, it could put a target on you. And I think, I can't remember who mentioned it, but there were people who were kind of ragging on the people who went for the advantage, saying like, oh, they feel safe. Like, why didn't they feel like they needed immunity? And, I think Lydia had good reason being like, I saw solo cups, I saw ping pong balls. I'm not winning that. Like, that's just not me. So like, why not try to win something else? And so like, I get that reasoning. But I think when you're at the top of the merge, you don't want to come off. You don't want to give anyone an impression that you think you feel safe. So I would have competed for the individual immunity. But like, I do see both sides, but I don't know. That's where I would have gone. What about you, Jon?
It's really tough because I have big feet. I don't know how dexterous they are. I don't know how well I could stack these cups.
Yeah.
And even if I could get the cup stacked, I don't know if I could get that ping pong ball on top of that die at the end, which is what Lydia is talking about here.
Right.
So in that instance, I hear Scrabble-like puzzle. I'm like, okay, this is just a crossword of sorts. I'm fairly proficient with these things. I think it's tough because I never want to say that I'm not competing for immunity. But I do think that in this case, the challenge for the advantage more suits my skills than the one for immunity.
Totally.
I hate it because I'm very much the type of person who will say I will always compete for immunity. But I think based on the time that the contestants were given to kind of like digest everything and having to make that snap decision, I would have to choose which one I thought I had a higher chance of actually succeeding at.
Yeah. Which makes complete sense, especially in a game like this, where like, if you're not going to win something, at least give your chance to win an advantage, which could help you. And we do see that no one winds up winning it, because I think that the combination of it being a pretty difficult like puzzle to put like throw together, combined with the fact that it seemed like Ben just kind of completed this really quickly.
Yeah, that's one thing to really notice about this edit. When we're doing our edits and when McKenna cuts these challenges, there are usually moments where we have to speed up what's happening.
Yeah.
You have to keep in mind when we're watching this challenge, it's actually longer than it actually took place because it's intercut with the people doing the puzzle.
Right.
This challenge was over so fast.
Yeah.
Ben's ability to stack cups with his feet, absolutely impressive. This challenge maybe lasted like 2 minutes tops.
Oh, wow. Because I was going to say there was no speed up scene or anything like that. So
no,
it really did feel like it was moving quickly.
Yeah, it was so fast, which is another thing that really makes the advantage side tricky, because if you can't get that puzzle going immediately, if you take any moment to stop, there's incentive for the people fighting for immunity to finish the challenge as quickly as possible.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. You don't want to give like people time to like add another element into this game. What I'm curious about is I would love to see now Ben and Mike Simmons go at it, because this was a very similar Final Four challenge to what we had in Exile Island. So now I want to know which one of the two of them has the better monkey feet to stack some cups into a pyramid.
So like we said, Ben wins immunity incredibly quickly, leaving everyone who went for the advantage just high and dry. We see throughout the episode, everyone's just like, yeah, I didn't finish that in time.
Yeah.
So not a single one of them gets this advantage. It was an extra vote that now no one really needs to worry about. But there's something else going on at this challenge. Our hosts had different letters in their names capitalized, which when unscrambled gave you safety max or max safety, which Lydia finds out a bit later. And she's explaining that she's received this clue that states in order to get an idol, she needs to stand up in tribal council and leave for 30 seconds.
Yeah. And she did it.
She did. It's quite impressive.
And I like the way that, I was gonna say I like the way she got away with it, but it was cool that she found it, because I maybe I have to go back and rewatch to see if it's visible from like the audience perspective, but I did not notice their names change when I was just watching it, on Monday, I guess it was for that episode. But that doesn't surprise me, because I never noticed any name changes or anything when we played Exile. I didn't get any of those advantages or anything like that. I'm so oblivious to some of these twists, so it went over my head. But I think there was another person who mentioned that they had seen it. Was it Ben?
I believe Vee mentions that she saw it.
Okay.
And when she checks, she just gets the message that there's nothing here. So this was in fact first person to notice, first person to send it in was the first person.
Another Lydia Vee showdown for the
exactly. Lydia and Vee just competing for all these advantages.
Yeah.
Speaking of Vee, we also see after the challenge that she accidentally chose to go for the advantage over immunity. She just got kind of flustered, choosing which card. She showed the wrong card, and she had to compete for this advantage.
Yeah.
We're then getting into like that merge talk. People are excited to be in the merge. Yeah. We see these groups of people getting together, and the first group we see get together is Emily, Lydia, Ben, Lo, and Lex. They're talking about forming a 6-person majority with Vee. Ben kind of starts his "I won't vote for anyone in this room" tour here, which we see him use a lot moving forward.
His catchphrase.
But then we have the most interesting aspect of this whole group. Lo immediately throws out Luke's name as like, you know what, Luke's pretty sketchy. Let's vote him out. What do you think about Lo throwing out someone who's been her ally to this point?
I think it's really interesting for a couple of reasons. One, she was like, I have to cool down. And then she's the one to kind of throw out the name who winds up the person who goes home. So it's a little funny that she's like, I have to cool down, but then kind of doesn't. But in a way, she still does. because she's getting rid of her ally. She's getting rid of someone who's like one of her numbers and who people assume is working with her. So by like having one of her allies go, it almost does cool her down, even though she kind of like was the first person to throw the name out. I also think she might see Luke as more of a liability than an asset to her, even though knowing that he's loyal to her, it might not be good for her game for probably a couple different reasons. One of which it seems like is that, and with these two votes, it seems like there's like a similar theme here. And it's like with Luke, it's just that he's like a little bit too chaotic, or he's a little bit too like game body or game focused. So it's like all about when he's in a room, it seems like he's talking, and granted it's the edit, right? There's hours of footage we're not seeing, but it seems like he's in a room, he's like, oh great, like this is the 4, this is it, what are we doing? Or like, very kind of like quick. And I think for some of these players, especially someone like Lowe, who this is her first time doing anything like it, a slower pace and kind of a more social game, even though it's a mini, seems to be kind of where everyone's vibing. It's like, because with Ben it's the same thing, it's kind of that chaotic energy that and then that scares people. And sometimes you do want that and you do need it, but like with Luke, he stood out so much pre-merge that like he kind of made himself the obvious early merge boot, I think.
Yeah, I kind of talked about it last week, where last round Luke really made his opinion well known in the tribe and like push it a lot. We see who said it today, that someone, or who said it this episode? Somebody said it this episode that he just kept I think Vee said it, that Luke was following her around the entire time, kind of like guarding her.
Yes. Yeah. And it is interesting watching players kind of realize how to use the breakout room, like the menu and everything like that, to see like where everyone is, because you can start saying like, oh, like those two, like we're talking, those are our 2 targets and they're in the room right now, like talking, like what name are they throwing out, so it's cool to watch people realize like the different methods they can use to see what's going on, because it's not like you're on a beach and you can see who's running off and scrambling where, but this just gives you that little bit of visibility into some of that background scrambling.
Exactly. And we see a lot of people talking about the background a lot this episode, because we even get Lex saying he's willing to let these people go forward with their main character vibes and is okay sitting back. We get Ben talking about the fact that he doesn't feel like he's in a good position. Understandably, he hasn't voted correctly yet in the game. So, but he has his immunity and he's really hoping he can leverage that to kind of get himself better footing. He suggests a final 4 with Lydia, Emily, and Vee, to which Emily immediately throws him under the bus afterwards, saying, yeah, he does this in every room he's in. It's not good.
It's also he's very much centering his alliances around Lydia and Vee, who the 3 of them were all on Kirka, right, to start. So like from Emily's perspective, I'd be like, what the heck? Like, I don't like, sure, you say yes to an alliance always, but I'd be like, I'm not working with like I'm the low man on the totem pole here. After that, like, no, I'm not gonna do that. So it's, and even with his 6, like in his alliance of 6, he's got Lydia and Vee there too. So I'm wondering if like Ben should have tried to branch out at some point, but I think the idea of like putting the vote on Luke was a good idea. Everyone seemed to rally around it. And I think it's also really interesting how Jon and Lydia's names came up, because everyone kind of knew it's like these aren't the targets, but well, I guess Luke assumed that Lydia would be, but everyone was just kind of like Jon and Vee were like, you know what, like just in case, like let's put some other votes out there just in case Luke has something, which is a safe move in a game like this, and especially with a player like Luke who is experienced and could very well have had some kind of advantage.
Yeah, and we definitely see, I think we really start seeing how things are going to shake out moving forward here. We have Vee mention to Emily how she feels that Sarah, Austin, and Jon are tight. And it's really interesting to see that like Lex is left out of this conversation. This tribe swap seems to have been really good for Lex, because he isn't associated with those 3 as much, because he was off on the other tribe and he wasn't one of that 3 on the swap tribe there.
Yeah, I've been, just a note on Lex, I've been really impressed with how someone with such a big personality can be like such a like under the like everyone's just kind of like, I don't know, it's just very impressive. Like no one has really suggested his name yet. Everyone loves him. I mean, he's a lovable guy. Like you can tell immediately, right? So like his social game is just very impressive. And I'm wondering if people are going to catch on to it, or if he's gonna just keep laying low and like kind of like influencing the vote from behind the scenes. Like he plays dumb really well. Like it's like, I'm very impressed by Lex.
Yeah, I mean, I think he really shines in the second episode this week, based on his performance here. So we then cut to Emily saying she actually wants Lydia or Vee gone. Emily's just so wild because she's so good at just talking.
She's so herself.
Yeah, she is. She's so good at talking in these conversations and making people feel comfortable.
Yeah.
And then immediately giving us a confessional being like, I'm gonna vote their ass out of here.
Yeah, it's so fun. It's really fun to watch her play. And like even just like her physicality, right? Like she'll just be like sitting there like slumped over in her chair like talking, and it just makes you feel like an authentic conversation with her, because she's not, you know, sitting up and like, you know, trying to be, I don't know, like recognizing the fact that she's on camera and trying to act a certain way. Like she's just like, she's herself through and through. And it's like, it's just really fun to watch her play and kind of see what her mind is going to do. Like I'm always waiting to be like, what, like I'm waiting for the next Emily confessional being like, what bomb is she about to drop? Like Lex might be dropping the F-bombs, but Emily's dropping like game bombs like everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. And her physical performance, I think, is so important to her game. Yeah. I think, like you mentioned, like she's slumped down a lot of the time, but she also gets really enthusiastic about things, and it makes people trust you more when you can do that type of physical performance in game.
Like you get excited when someone joins your scramble room. She's like, oh my God, yes, like you're the person I was waiting to see. And you're like, oh my God, like, thank you. Like that makes me feel great. Like
so then we get Luke kind of for the first time in this episode, and Luke hasn't heard anything. And
bad sign.
This is it's a bad sign, and this is where I really need to critique Luke's game here, because he is so focused on getting somebody else to say a name that he just kind of lets himself be the name here, I feel. Because this is just a theme that continues through the entire episode. Luke joining groups, being like, okay, what's the name? Okay, let's work together and come up with a name right now. And he's just not willing to give out that name. There is a point in Survivor where if no one's willing to give you a name, you have to change that narrative. You have to push a name. Yes, it's dangerous, and a lot of people are scared to throw out a name. But if you're not hearing anything, that means it's your name. So you have to start the counteroffensive at some point, and we just don't see Luke doing that here.
Yeah, completely. And you know, I feel like even when he's in his like smaller groups, and it doesn't seem like it's like until the very end when he's like, all right, we have 2 minutes left. Like, what are we doing? Like, what's the name? And it's like, you got to do that before 2 minutes, buddy. Like, because it did seem like he was getting a little bit more concerned as the round was going on. So I was wondering, like, why? I don't know. I mean, he could have pushed Lydia harder, and honestly, people might have gone for it. But I don't know. I think with Loa already having turned on him, it didn't seem like she was gonna then like not vote him out and stuff. So like he's kind of in a hard place, and so you can kind of see like the panic setting in. I don't know what he could have done to get out of this. I don't know. I think there's just kind of like a consensus on him, and I don't know if much was gonna, you know, get unstuck on him.
Yeah, and
it's tough. It's hard because that's just like everyone else is just playing a good game, and like they identified you as someone who like is gonna kind of threaten their game in one way or another down the road, and like everyone's like, yeah, we agree because of how he played the pre-merge, or because of how he's like perceived from a distance. Like, some people, you don't actually have like a time to interact with them before the merge or before swap tribe or anything, but like you see them from like across the bar, right, at like the challenges, and you're like, there's just something about them that like seriously, like with you, Jon, like in Exile, I was always like, Jon has like, he's just like kind of, it seemed like you were just like running your Alexa tribe. So I was always like, oh God, like that Jon, he's going to be tricky once we get to the merge. And it's like, you just see him from across the room and you're like, oh God, like, I don't know. Like when you have the chance to get rid of him, if you didn't have a good feeling that you want to work with them, it's like, you gotta just go with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And we see Luke's real doom come when we get Lex and Lo talking with Emily and Jon and Sarah about forming a 5.
Mm-hmm.
And like at that point, Lo is so far removed from Luke. I do think Lo's play in this round is so impressive because she builds herself a structure to separate herself from Luke, so that even with Luke going home, it isn't like, okay, Luke's gone, now we can focus on Lo.
Totally.
It's now Lo is in a couple of different power structures, which she can use to propel herself further in the game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very impressed by Lo.
So we then get some more talk with like Austin v. Sarah and Lex are in a room, and they like, Luke's the only name we're hearing. Luke then pops into the room, and he's like, okay, what are we doing? And no one says anything. Like, this is the moment where Luke has to realize, okay, it's me.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's a good like 10 seconds where people are just kind of like staring at each other in this room. And then he says he wants to target challenge competitors,
right,
in this in one of the rooms that he's in. And Ben and Lo are the people who have won the immunity challenges so far, and they're in the room with them. I don't know. As this round progressed, Luke's play just seemed to get sloppier and sloppier.
Yeah, it's like true scrambling. Like we call these the scramble rooms, but like he's just scrambling. He's doing it. He's trying to like throw anything out, and it's kind of throw out the wrong thing to the wrong people, which was not the reason he went home, but it was just kind of displaying kind of like, I think accurately how he was feeling in the moment, where like he just needed to say something and it just wasn't the right thing. And like I said earlier, I don't know what would have been the right thing. Yeah, well, what he does end up saying is, hey, can we stop being cagey and start talking and getting to know each other? And it's like, ooh, Luke, I don't know, that's the best approach to this situation here. Yeah, too little, too late. A lot of like really fun having Luke on, and I thought he was like a really fun character, fun player. Yeah. I always like having someone like this on a season, but I think he would have had to change his game from earlier on to have a deeper run in this one. Yeah, so we do get to Tribal Council now, and as soon as Tribal Council starts, Lydia starts sneezing. Mm-hmm. And walks off screen. She is off screen for a total of 37 seconds, and it doesn't look like a single person even notices. Mm-mm. And she comes back with her water, takes a sip of water. It was like totally casual. I was like, go Lydia. Like, this is great. Have we ever had anyone have 2 idols in a game before? Yes. Oh yeah, you. True. Yes, true. But not in a mini. Not in a mini, I don't think. Yeah. It's so cool that she's. I mean, I just want to know like what she's gonna do with it. Yeah, we'll have to wait and find out. Spoiler alert: she doesn't use it this Tribal Council. No. So we have a bit of talk, about the shifting dynamics of the merge, how hard it is to like balance everything. We have to mention that like this is for a 3-tribe season. Mm-hmm. The tribal divisions of this merge are very even. We have 2 tribes of 3 and a tribe of 4 here. Yep. Yeah. And no one like with the exception of like V just being like, I'm gonna write down Jon's name kind of like as just in case. Like the Tugela 4, even though they've got the majority, it's like I would have thought maybe the Kirka and Iguazu 3s would be like, all right, let's even things out. But like, that wasn't a thought in their mind. And that it's just, I think it's because we had that swap, and there were other relationships built, and people don't look at, like we mentioned, don't look at Lex as part of that Tugela group and things like that. So it's it's fun to see like all the dynamics. There's people who are like, haven't had a chance to talk to them, or at least not in like a smaller setting. So like there's still a lot of like mystery and stuff, and it's cool seeing everyone come together.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, we get talked about the good vibes. We're vibing this season. It's our trending word. It's vibing. We get to the vote. Like you said, Vee places this vote on Jon just in case Luke does end up having an idol. It's a smart play. If Jon doesn't put the second vote on Lydia, which he does because he wants to stoke the flames. He's just like, Lydia got some votes last time. Like, let's just pretend people are still after Lydia.
Yeah.
Honestly, smart play by Jon. I understand exactly where he's coming from here. I think it's a risky play. I wouldn't do it personally. But in order to, knowing that so many people were voting Luke, it gives him that idol protection, and it also can further his motivations further on in the game. So I understand it. Ultimately, we get to the vote. It is 7 votes Luke, 2 votes Lydia, because Luke also voted Lydia, and 1 vote Jon. Luke is then voted out and becomes the first member of our jury. So, Greg, overall, what are your thoughts on the season so far?
Oh man, I'm loving it. I think this is our best cast ever. Sorry to all other casts. I think you're great, but like from like top to bottom, I think this is a really great group. I think everyone's playing a great game. I think at this point, honestly, like the way things are going, I think a lot of people have a chance to it. I think there's some people who have to do a little bit more, but it's we're halfway through. There's still so much game left to play, so I'm really excited. I think there's still like some drama ahead looming, which I'm excited to see. I think people are starting to pick out people as being threats to their own game. So yeah, I'm really loving it. I have to say this is probably my favorite season so far that we've done.
Well, I love to hear it. We're doing a bit of a different structure this week. So Greg's not going to talk about the second episode. I'm going to name my MVP with that second guess. But Greg, who is your MVP of the week?
A lot of good choices. I know I mentioned like Lowe's playing a good game, Lex is playing a good game, but I don't think either of them like stood out as being like the player of the week for me, like the MVP. I think I'm actually going to give it to Jon. I think Jon is setting himself up really well. I think he's insulated with a lot of people. He's insulated with Emily. He's got his Tugela group. He's just making good inroads with people. And it does seem like he's standing out as a threat. He was identified as a threat in the Ben boot, but he still has like people who want to keep him around. And I think that's really good gameplay at the top of the merge. People could suss him out eventually, but I think he played the top of the merge really well, where he could have been a target. And even with like in Lifelines, with his saying like, I'm not going to win a couple of these like first initial like ball tosses so that he doesn't have to take someone else's life, like so smart. Whereas like Ben did not do that, and that kind of screwed Ben. So I think I'm giving it to Jon. I think he's playing a great game so far.
Awesome. Well, Greg, it's always a pleasure to speak with you. Thank you for joining us this week, and enjoy the rest of the season.
Thanks. Talk to you guys later.
All right. So on to a second episode, and I have a new guest here. We have Garrett from Erik Islands here. Garrett, how are you doing?
Doing great. Honestly, on night shifts here, so a little tired, but we'll make it happen. Love being able to watch the episode and all that stuff in between them. So
excellent. How are you feeling about the season so far?
It's been really good. I'm really liking the 3 tribes that made it happen, because I feel like it's made things a lot more fluid than it started on my season, at least, not as much of a pick-off. So I'm really enjoying seeing that, keeping things up in the air. Plus, it's been fun to watch Ben, who I know in real life, do it, as well as Jon, who I've played a game with before. So it's super fun to watch both of them too.
Awesome. Well, let's get into this. We started off the episode, and Vee, again, starting this episode telling us that she hadn't heard anything about advantages. other than, you know, she noticed Alex and McKenna's names switch at that last challenge, but she hasn't heard anything else. One of those things you really got to look out for. And interesting because it seems like she doesn't think anyone got this advantage from the last challenge either, where some people were competing for that advantage. We then get Sarah talking about how last tribal, the Luke vote, was probably the easiest vote for the rest of the game. It was pretty easy to rally everyone around voting out Luke, and it's only going to get harder from here. And then we get Lydia, who, you know, just got another idol, and she's feeling really iffy about her long-term perspectives in the games. You know, she feels that based on her previous org experience, that her allies always flip on her in every game other than the one she wins. You know, Lydia, that was quite the subtle flex there, just saying that you won like that. But Garrett, what do you think? Like, is it an inevitability that your allies are going to flip on you in a game?
I think depending on the allies, but some people will ride or die to the end, even if they know they're going to lose. And looking at kind of Vee and Lydia's relationship, I think Vee might be willing to do that right now, because I know when Lydia took the idol from Vee that Vee was planning on getting, Vee was all about it since it worked out. So Vee had no reservations there. So I'm wondering if that'll continue throughout the game. But I'm all for Lydia right now, especially finding a second idol. I know as well as anybody how valuable idols can be, or even the perception of idols can be in this game. A little different this time since there's that idol nullifier wrinkle in it right now. But I don't think anybody expects her of having a second one. So should work out pretty well for her, I think. And she seems to be socially positioned well, like maybe jumping ahead here, but in that challenge, even after a successful idol play and being in like the tribe that's kind of on the outs right now, she was like one of the last people left in a social challenge, which was pretty impressive. I felt like.
Yeah, absolutely. When you can position yourself that well, and I think maybe even having to play that idol. And like, yes, it's a successful idol play, but she was so on the outs on that vote where the 4 voted against her and everyone saw the 4 vote against her. I think it really helped position herself because people were like, okay, it shouldn't be hard to rally against Lydia later. So we don't have to worry about her right now. And I think it did actually do something to bolster her position in the game a little bit there. We then get Jon talking about the last vote, and he thinks that the vote for him was from Luke, and he assumes Austin voted with him for Lydia, which is kind of a really bad read because we do know what happened. Because we do know that Luke ended up voting Lydia, and we know that Vee cast that one hinky vote for Jon there. It's interesting because he's also talking about voting for Lydia here as an attempt to kind of like bring her in and be like, hey, look, people are still willing to vote you out, so you should come work with us and secure her here. It's just really weird. And then we have Lex talking about the vote, and he's like, I don't know why people voted Lydia because I never heard Lydia's name. So it really just goes to show that when you throw these type of votes out there, it can really confuse some people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think throwing the vote on Jon's side was a really good idea because I don't think anybody suspects him of doing it. So I think he can maybe use that to build that relationship with Lydia there. But I definitely think his read on the hinky vote on him, I think maybe he should have thought about it that somebody might have been doing the same thing he was doing and kind of just thrown it aside. Like, I think hinky votes really don't matter that much unless we end up in weird situations like, fake idols and all that. But I mean, as long as it's not a majority, I think you just gotta chill about any hinky votes because oftentimes it is situations like this where Jon's trying to use it to manipulate Lydia, or he's kind of making some incorrect perceptions now about where the vote was on him.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this impacts his game moving forward, and if he's able to kind of suss out how this vote actually went down. But now we're into the challenge. It's called Lifelines, and it's just your classic coconut challenge with a bit of a twist here. So in order to see if you get a chopped someone here, instead of answering questions, the Castaways have to bounce a ping pong ball off of 1 or 2 solo cups into a solo cup. They get 3 shots at it every round. for each ball that lands in the solo cup, they get to send a shot someone's way. And if they manage to get all 3 of their balls in a single round into the cup, they can't have anyone shot at them. So each of the Castaways starts with 5 lives, and the order with which it's chosen how they will chop is randomized at first, and then will be a rolling order. So the first person who shoots it in one, or who shoots their shot in one round, will be the last person in the next round if they manage to land their balls. What do you think of this challenge, Eric?
Yeah, so social challenges are always tricky just because they do put the people who are in the minority at a lower chance of winning. I did like the wrinkle in it that if you hit all 3, you're safe, which did happen for Ben the first round. But yeah, I really did like the challenge, though. I think watching it play out too, Jon had a good strategy of just like playing it low at first and then coming out later, because I do think once Ben hit that 3, people were going to focus in on him afterwards. So it was maybe a little early for that. But I mean, I get his back's against the wall. You want to hit as many as you can all the time. I think maybe concentrating them on one person instead of trying to spread them out and play nice would have been a little smarter. I think somebody in the recap in the exit interview mentioned maybe concentrating on Austin. And I get the fear of not wanting to be like that guy targeting Austin, but also if everybody else knows you're only targeting Austin, they're a little bit less threatened by you. So I think that might have been the move. So you didn't piss off Sarah like you did that time. And then you don't have 3 people coming at you with theirs saying, oh, it's just returning the favor, because then you're just focusing in fire on yourself. But I definitely think that Jon played it right there. And then Austin just kicked ass on it. So kudos.
Yeah, it's really interesting because it does seem like the predominant strategy for this challenge was very much just shoot back at the people who have already shot at you until you get to a point where your shot can eliminate someone. And then, sorry, I have to eliminate you because I have the chance to. And it seems to be just how everyone's rolling here. Ben, like you said, gets his 3 immediately, but spreads it out between Emily and Sarah, which then, puts Ben into a bad spot because he's the first one shooting. Maybe knowing how the order was, because they could see the order, knowing what that was, even not doing that when you're at the top of the order and waiting until you're towards the bottom of the order so you have an opportunity to kind of shoot back or at least see where things are going, would have been a better strategy for Ben here. But I mean, you also have to go for it, right? The challenge competitor in Ben, I don't think would let him do that. I think he would push for it no matter what. And if you're confident enough in your skills that you can get 3 every time, you can still get to the end of this challenge despite kind of making enemies in it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's hard when you're on the bottom too, because I could miss all of these at the beginning and try to lay low, but you could still get them thrown your way and people could just say it's because you won the last 2. So I get his position where it's like, fuck it, let's just get all 3. I just think splitting them up to people who are already not really targeting you. I guess Emily kind of was, but people who aren't really targeting you as much, I think that might have not have been the right move, because if you just throw them all on one person, everybody else is going to know what you're doing and might save you for a little later and give you a couple more rounds before they hit you with anything. And I don't believe Austin hit any on that first one either. I could be wrong, but
no, he didn't. No, he did, because he sent it to Lydia.
Okay, yep. But he wouldn't have been able to give it to Ben because he had the 3 that time. So
and then we kind of see Lex's strategy when he does eventually get some, and he hasn't had any put on him so far. It's just like spreading it out to the people who haven't had them.
Yep.
Which I think is like the safest thing to do in that position. It doesn't make it seem like you're targeting anyone, especially when you have multiples at that point. Like we just talked about how it's kind of bad for Ben to do it on multiple people here. But again, he put 1 on Emily and 2 on Sarah. So like Sarah for sure knows he's going after her. Whereas Lex gets it late enough, like a couple rounds in, where it makes sense to be like, well, you don't have any, so you need some now. And we see a couple other people employ that later, giving Lex his first shot and giving Low her first shot as well. But eventually, Jon doesn't sink a ball until the 5th round. He makes a real big deal about getting it in too, which I thought was a really smart play by him. As he explains in the confessional later, like he was intentionally doing this. He wasn't wanting to take first shots. He wanted to just return shots. And he made sure everyone knew that he wasn't doing well at the first part of this challenge. What do you think about that? Is this something that can be effective? Because we kind of see people still talking about Jon as a challenge threat here in this episode.
Yeah, I think once you've got that label, it's really hard to get rid of it at all. I think it was a good idea for this challenge to maybe have a good shot of it. And it's something you can reference later, which he did. He did when he was talking to people, kind of reference later, just like, yeah, I did horrible at that one. It's kind of hit or miss. I think it's always a good idea if you're in a safe position to kind of undermine your threat level, try to throw a couple challenges here and there. And I think it was a good idea that he did that there. I think it's super interesting too, just watching how everybody approached this challenge differently. Because like the people who are feeling safe kind of played it more safe socially, where they're like giving it out to people who don't have any, firing back. And the people who are a little bit more backs against the wall are trying to have to go a little more aggressive. And it's just super interesting to watch. It's almost like a touchy subjects kind of thing, where it's like, if you're in a good spot and you don't need the immunity, you kind of just got to lie through that one. So I definitely think a lot of people were doing kind of similar strategies, which was cool to see.
Yeah. So ultimately we get to Austin winning. We get to the point where Lydia's right up with her back against the wall against him. She has 1 life left. Austin still has 3 or 4 at this point, and she has to hit all 3 in order to stay alive, and she doesn't. So Austin wins immunity. We then cut to Ben talking about the fact that, he knew he was going to be targeted pretty early in that one, and that he knows his name's going to be out there this round, but he's hoping that the structure he kind of built last time can help save him this round. Austin then talks about being surprised he, didn't get more shots based on how consistent he's been in challenges. And this is kind of where I'm noticing with Austin. Austin talks about his performance in challenges a lot. And not just in confessional, but to other people. And he voices these opinions. I also noticed this episode, Austin was talking a lot about the fact that, he's okay putting out Ben because Ben's already voted for him. And he brings it up over and over and over again. What do you think is the advantages or disadvantages of bringing these type of things up over and over again repeatedly to everyone you're having a conversation with?
Yeah, so I think on the voting out Ben side of it, I think that was a really good move on his part, because it's somebody he has a reason to vote for. He doesn't have a reason to vote for anybody else. Makes it clear to everybody where he's at. And with all the scramble rooms, you have to say it a couple times just to multiple people. I believe I might have said something about my fake idol once or twice here, just multiple rooms to try to really spread it. So I think reiterating that was a really good idea. The challenge performance one, I'm not as certain, because it seems like that's part of the reason, not the only reason, that Ben has this target right now. So I think if you're building yourself up to be a big challenge threat, people might come for you if you start losing. And I think he feels confident in his allies probably, and thinks maybe they see that as an asset, that he can win it and prevent the people from the outside from winning it. So that's kind of the pro side of it. But I do think it's something that people might get alarmed coming around, 7, around 6, before somebody can just go on an immunity run to the end.
Yeah, absolutely. We then see Lydia talking to Austin after the challenge, and Lydia just straight up asks, "Did you vote for me last round?" Bold in this one-on-one situation. I don't know. Is this the right thing to do? Is it a good idea to just straight up ask someone if they're the person who voted for you?
Yeah, that's tough. I think it depends. I think, again, like I said, I think if there's a single vote on you and it doesn't go anywhere, I think you just leave it. You can maybe say you're a little worried about it, kind of a little paranoid about it, and try to use that as a reason for any erratic behavior. But I mean, I think directly confronting it, I think it's people more often than not dig themselves into a hole doing it rather than put themselves in a better spot. I can see where maybe you can try to put yourself in a better spot by getting information, finding anything out. And I don't think she approached it in a way that dug herself in a hole either, but I don't think she really gained anything from it either. I think it was kind of a net neutral. but I think there's just a huge risk doing that you're gonna start digging yourself in the hole. So happy to see she didn't, but
yeah.
when she said it though, I was like, oh.
Yeah, it just catches you off guard, which is kind of the reason to do that, is it catches someone off guard, and you can kind of tell if they're lying or not. But Austin, of course, can tell the truth here. He didn't end up voting for Lydia. Ben joins them, and this is where we see Ben kind of take on his, well, I'm not going to vote for the people in this room tour. The strategy he puts out. So he tells them that, trying to find a name. We don't get one here. We then get Vee saying she wants to play loyal and stick with the people who are fun to play with. And I think this is something that's really understated sometimes when it comes to orgs. You're tired. It's a long day. You don't want to be around people who make you miserable. So being someone who is fun to play with, someone who you can get along with, someone who isn't rubbing people the wrong way, can really position you so well in these games, because even if you are this massive threat, there are probably some people who are just like, I'm here to have fun and I want to have it with enjoyable people.
Yeah, absolutely. The fun factor is a huge underestimated factor in these minis. I think I remember specifically in my season too, like oftentimes those votes got a little hinky because people would get bored. The pickoff started, and then Bill decides to vote for Tom because he's like, you know what, let's just have fun with it. I don't think anything's going to happen. And then it did. And then, after that, Celestina was left out, wanted to have some fun, make a move, then Vinny goes. So I think the fun factor really can play a huge role, especially in these mini games. So it's super interesting hearing Vee comment on it, because I could definitely see that trend.
We then get Emily, Lex, and Vee in this conversation, and they're talking about, do they even care about challenge threats? Because if they get rid of the challenge threats, are they even going to win these challenges? And here we have Vee once again mentioning we should really work to break up this Jon, Austin, and Sarah group, because they're getting too close. They are very close. I don't think they'll float away from each other. But she says this in a room with Lex. And when we were talking about the last episode, we mentioned how Lex kind of seems to be disassociated from this group because he was on the opposite swap tribe. Would you even mention this in Lex, thinking, oh yeah, Lex was on the original tribe with these three, he's totally just gonna take it back to them? Or do you think because of the swap tribe, it's safe to have this conversation with Lex?
I think because of the swap tribe, it's not necessarily like 100% safe, but I think it's like a risk you kind of have to take. Because I think if you want to get the votes for this, if you don't even talk to Lex, you're leaving 4 people who aren't going to do it in the trio plus Lex. So then, and I believe we're at 9 right now. Is that? Yeah. So then you need all 5 of the others to be on board to make anything happen. And that, I feel like that's super difficult in these scramble rooms. So I think if Lex is the only one in that room, I think you should still push it, because I think, Lex made it very obviously a lot of it was probably playing it up, but when he was swapped with them, he was like, yeah, I'm kind of on the outs of this 4, and I really like how he's playing this because he's positioning himself right in the middle. But I think it was perfectly fine there for Vee to trust him there on it, because I think you need that vote, honestly. Like, it's not like it's like a whole day to scramble kind of thing where you can get everybody aside. So if you could guarantee that, I think, maybe leave Lex out, have the 5 vote one of them out, and you're perfect there. But in the chaos of these scramble rooms, 100% throw it out in front of Lex. He might not even get the chance to circle it back because he'd have to be in the right room. So I think it was a good idea. Ultimately didn't pan out, but
yeah, I mean, ultimately, Lex does, in fact, go back to the other 3 and says, oh, yeah, maybe you all as a trio, which also, it's a risky thing for Lex to do here, because Lex is full out admitting they're not associating you with you, which could be dangerous, because then the trio views him as someone, oh, well, why aren't they associating you with this? But it could also have this positive of, oh, this means we can have someone kind of on the inside and getting intel for us, so we know what's going on. Lex has just put himself in such a fantastic position here, where everyone in the game seems to trust him. No one is talking. We had Luke talking about voting him out a couple rounds ago, but since then, no one's even mentioned Lex's name. we do see a conversation between Sarah and Ben, and they discuss about voting out Lydia, but Sarah's like, I mean, I guess, but like, I don't want to because I like her. And again, this really goes to show how being likable can give you such an advantage in this game, because if you can play on people's morals by being a likable person and you make them even take that moment to think about whether or not they want to vote you out, you can convince them not to.
Definitely.
Yeah. And then Austin, Lydia, and Emily talk about voting either Ben or Jon. And this is really what it comes down to. We have this conversation with Ben and Jon and their challenge performance. And that's really the driving factor between any of the strategy talk this episode, is figuring out which one of the two of them is the better one to vote. Austin, I think, like we were mentioning earlier, when Austin mentions that Ben threw out votes on him previously, because this is the conversation that's happening, Austin just saying, you know what, we shouldn't vote Jon, would be a red flag because they're viewing them as a trio. Austin saying, I'm totally okay with voting Ben because he's voted for me in the past, is a great way of still saying we shouldn't vote Jon without emphasizing the fact that you're working very closely with him.
Absolutely.
Austin feels that he's built some strong relationships at this point, but maybe he's painting himself too much as a challenge threat with this win. He didn't really think he needed the win, but he has it. You're safe. It's just how we keep going with it. Lydia, Ben, Vee, Lex, and Sarah are in a room, and Lydia tells Ben that his name's out there. And Ben says they're fine because there's 5 of us in the room. We can literally control this vote because we are a majority right now. And Ben really fights hard, saying Jon is not only this strong challenge threat that everyone's saying, but he's this strong social threat too, because he has these 2 people he's working very closely with, and he's just a likable person. So people might not think that, you know, you go for Jon here and you take him out. It's a good strategy. Like, the way Ben approaches this, he finds out who that second name is very quickly. He then pushes that name. And this is what we didn't see Luke doing in the last episode, where Luke wasn't willing to push a name out. He was kind of just waiting for someone to give him a name. Ben takes the offensive here. He really pushes hard, trying to make people think, you know, it should be Jon. Like, we have to keep going. What do you... How do you think? Like, with Ben navigating this, you know Ben personally. Is this a way Ben is outside of the game? Is Ben this type of assertive person? Or is this just Ben in game mode?
Yeah, so he's definitely in game mode here. And I've seen him be in this mode before, playing and hosting him in a couple of the live stuff that we do. But yeah, so I think it was a good approach for the plan of voting Jon. I think he maybe didn't realize just how ingrained Jon was with some other people, such as Sarah, or not Sarah, such as Emily. So I do think that kind of clouded his vision with it a little bit, to think that they had the numbers to make it happen. But I do think that the approach was right. I mean, if you have 5 people in a room together, it's been a confusing round. If you can lock everybody in on one move, that's oftentimes, I think, when things come together, is when you finally get a majority in one room and you're like, okay, we're doing this, cool, let's split up. So I think it was the right approach for a wrong move. I think Jon was somebody who had shown some willingness to work with Ben earlier on in the game. He actually kind of saved him round 3. So then I think maybe targeting Jon wasn't the best move on his part. I know Lowe's name got thrown around too, which I'm not sure if that would have connected. She's been playing pretty under the radar, I feel like. And I'm just not certain if people would cut her. But at the same time, I think he would have had chance of getting Jon on board there, and maybe Jon could have brought the trio on board too at that point. So I think that could have been a better idea. Or if you were going to target the trio, I think maybe Sarah's the target, since Jon's pitched, you know, maybe I'm willing to cut Sarah at some point. Just knowing that Jon had that working relationship with him, I think he kind of underutilized that when he was trying to make it do, and put too much eggs in the Emily basket, which she was not on board at all from the beginning.
Well, it's so hard, I think, for people to figure out how to deal with the Emily basketball, right? Because Emily is she's so good at convincing people that she's with them.
She really is.
It's just impressive how she convinces everyone that she's working with them and that she's able to just put herself in a position where everyone's wanting to work with her. Emily has probably the most information in this entire game.
Oh, yeah.
And she's sharing it, and she's not getting caught for it. It's quite impressive how she's maneuvering herself.
Yeah, it really is. Like, she was put in the position where she could have been either the easy target or the ultimate swing on her first tribe. And honestly, I think they should have went with easy target at the time, because I mean, it would have just ended in the 3-3 the next time. And then if they won immunity, which it turned out with the twist, it wouldn't have mattered. But you know, in theory, if they won the next immunity, they would have been able to just not have to deal with it, and they would have had a strong group for the merge. So I think that would have been the best move for them. But Emily was able to kind of convince them to gun for each other. And she's been keeping that going this whole time. Like, she's, you know, really good to Ben's face on trying to make him think they're with each other. They have this Michigan connection and they can make it happen. And the moment he leaves the room, she's like, the fuck is he talking about? He's making deals everywhere. I mean, which is really good too, because I don't think he was actually making that many deals. It was just that the couple deals he made included Emily. So that Emily's like, how many more is he making? So I definitely think it's super interesting, because she is killing the game in this position. I'm curious how it will last. Like, if she makes it to the end still doing this is the type of gameplay that could piss people off in the end and burn a couple votes. But I think otherwise, though, I think she's playing great. Like, if I were on that jury and she did this to me, she'd have my vote. But it just kind of depends on the people.
Yeah, absolutely. And you just mentioned Lowe. And this is what we see here, is that Lowe's finally having her name thrown out there. She's been in such a solid position so far in this game. She seems to be very good socially. She's made that little bit of an iffy move last round where she throws out Luke's name, who's someone she's associated with. And now people are just realizing they don't really know anything about Lowe. So we see Sarah, Vee, Ben, and Lydia kind of asking, like, what's Lowe's story? Like, what's up with her? And we see them discussing, she's performing really well in challenges too. We shouldn't just like push her to the side. She should be in this challenge beast conversation here. And she's mentioned that she like did like, what was it? Like Spartan races or something like that previously. So Lowe's not so under the radar. I guess her plan of like laying low and fading into the background isn't really working so far.
Yeah, definitely. I'm kind of worried about her position here in the future now. I think the under the radar strategy was working really well early on, but I think the kind of negative consequence we're seeing is that people don't feel like they know her. And I think that can become really dangerous down the line, because if they need an easy vote at any point, like say the target wins immunity, or, you know, they end up wanting to save the target, she becomes an easy person to flip it to, because they don't know her, they don't have the connection to her. And then also, like we mentioned, you know, they know all the things that they do know about her make her appear to be more of a challenge beast. Like, the only things they seem to talk about knowing about her are these Spartan races, are these things that would make her more threatening. So I definitely think she's going to have a rougher road ahead of her here, now that she can't just lay low anymore, and have to fend off some things. I don't even know if she knows that her name was out there yet either, which could be concerning.
Yeah, we do get her confessional just after this, where she's talking about the fact that she didn't want to throw the comp, but she also didn't really want to win it, so she's kind of glad that she didn't end up winning. But as she feels like her name may be floating around, but she doesn't know it is floating around. We then get Sarah talking about whether or not it's time to kind of break from her original tribe, which is good. It's good to see that Sarah's having this thought process, that she's realizing kind of her position in the game. She knows that people are viewing her, Jon, and Austin as a trio, and she's kind of knows that she's going to have to break apart from it at some point. It's just a matter of gauging when that time is. Lydia talks about being comfortable with Ben and Vee, and she's still feeling pretty good about Lex. She also is kind of feeling that Emily, Jon, and her are far too similar to make it to the end together. So again, we have people really starting to realize their position in the game and how to move forward. Then we get Emily again. And Emily's telling Lydia, Ben, and Lo that it seems to be overwhelmingly the votes are going on Jon. And then she's talking to Jon, and she says, yeah, everyone thinks that the votes are going on you, but they're not. Don't worry. But everyone thinks that. And this is what Emily does so well. She pushes a narrative and then reinforces it with the people who it's targeted. Like, it's just fascinating to see this girl play.
Oh yeah, I've been loving it the whole season. She's been so fun to watch, and especially partly because she's been kind of clowning on my boy Ben here the whole time. So it's been great. Like, we'll go Ben confessional, like, oh, I feel great about her. Immediately to her, like, nope, not feeling. I'm like, oh, come on. But it's been so fun to watch. I love the way she's playing. If you can play a solid middle game, that's like the ideal position in my opinion. It's so hard to not get caught. So I'm hoping she can keep it going. But I also think with the scramble room format, it's a little bit easier to play it that way because of the fact that it's harder to get the right group of people together at once to catch you in the act. Because I feel like you usually need the right group of people together to really start exposing things and talking about you. And when they're together, who knows if they're even going to be talking about you at that point? There's a bunch of other things going on. So I do think it kind of opens things up a little bit when people have less time to react to it, less time to process. So I'm hoping she can keep it going because I'm really enjoying watching.
Yeah, and we see this conversation with her and Jon, and then we see Jon also play incredibly well here because Lo joins the room that the two of them are in, and he immediately says the three of them should work together to vote out Ben. And Lo, right on it, just says, yeah, okay, I'm in. And I have been so impressed with these players and their ability to pivot conversations when other people enter the room this season, because that is something a lot of people struggle with in minis. And we see it even in Survivor, people struggle with it, where someone walks up and like, how do they pivot a conversation? But people on this season, we see Jon doing it here. We've seen Emily doing it previously. We've seen even Ben doing it, pivoting the conversation to include the person who has just popped in, even if like a moment beforehand you were talking about voting them out. This cast is just really adept at doing it.
Yeah, they have been really good with that. There's been no like Chanel at the beach moments this season. So it definitely been really, really impressed by that.
So we have a bit more talk. Sarah's kind of mentioning, Emily panics really easily. Emily feels that Ben's crazy and that she's the next crazy, and people have been kind of voting out these big personalities. So she is a little concerned that voting out Ben here could mean the target shifts to her in the future. It's a tough situation to be in, but sometimes you just have to go with it, especially if it seems the numbers are going that way. We finally get the moment where the original Tugela tribe, all four of them, are in a room together, and Lex just straight up tells them, yeah, I'm still with you guys. Let's do this. Let's vote out Ben. We're fine. And then we see Lex talking to Ben, telling him he hasn't heard a name. And just Lex, in the back half of this episode, plays dumb so much. It's so risky because you play dumb to too many people, someone's going to catch on. But Lex is able to just act shocked whenever anyone gives him information. It's fascinating to see. And with his facial expressions and his physical performance, he sells it really well. Emily tells Austin, Jon, and Lo that the other side wants to split up that trio of Jon, Austin, Sarah. People are just not hiding how close they are at this point. Like, aside from Lex kind of being on the outsides in many people's eyes, they're just not hiding it. And there's four of them. They make up half the tribe if they all survive this vote. It's putting them in a very strong position moving forward. Vee again talking to Lex and Emily about how tight that trio is. And Emily just straight up says, no, Sarah's not tight with them. She's just playing. Like, you don't have to worry about Sarah. Vee buys it. Like, she buys what Emily's selling here, and that takes us to tribal council.
Yeah, and it's super interesting with that too, because I mean, Sarah said in her confessional that she might be willing to make the cut. I don't know if she's ever said that to Emily though. So I'm curious because I know they have a pretty solid relationship from past episodes. So I'm curious if that will be something that develops. If, you know, Sarah will flip on them for Emily. A lot of people have kind of steered their games off course for Emily, so I could see it happening. But I do wonder if that doesn't happen. I do think Emily and Lo maybe put themselves in a little bit worse of a position by not taking one of the three out before going for Ben. But I mean, I guess at the same time, you know, I mean, they don't have the +1 of Lex, but if they think Lex might be with Lydia and Vee, then the other side has the 4. So it's kind of tough on that because Lex can kind of flip to either and make it a 4.
Yeah, exactly. So we're at Tribal Council. Sarah's kind of discussing how getting early shots in the challenge kind of doomed you because at some point it just makes sense to cut you because you have so many chops already. So interesting, we kind of discussed that challenge strategy already. Lydia talks about being a bit insecure after getting a few votes last round. And then it's the first time Ben's been vulnerable in the individual portion of the game. Yes, this is only the second vote in like the individual portion, but there was that tribal council where he already had won individual immunity in the tribal phase too. And we just get a lot of talk about setting up for the future. And that seems to be the big thing with this episode is a lot of people setting up for the future moving forward. So we get to the vote, and by a vote to 6-3, Ben is voted out of the game. Such a fantastic character. Garrett, what did you think of Ben's game?
Yeah, he was really fun to watch this season. I wasn't expecting the mess, honestly. I've seen him play very cleanly, very like calculated, and I've seen him hide his threat level a little better. The first time I saw him play, like I hosted kind of like a live thing with my friends, and like he didn't know any of them at first, and like was able to weasel his way in and like won the whole thing. Like there's maybe 19 people, and he just like worked in. He knew who the winners were, so he aligned with them, and then just kind of cut them one by one. So like seeing him be a little bit more messy here was really fun to watch. I really enjoyed it. And I think a lot of it was he kind of trusted the wrong people. Like he really thought Emily was on his side. So I feel like a lot of times he'd make these big pitches that included Emily, and Emily would run somewhere else and be like, nope, he's making these pitches. So I think it was really cool to watch. I really enjoyed watching him. I think he'd do great on another season if he can kind of tone it back a little more. But I think that was the biggest kind of takeaway is maybe a little bit less trying to dominate the strategic talk, because then people are going to look at you.
Yeah, I mean, Ben caught my eye immediately as soon as he applied for the game. He was such a fantastic character. Loved having him on this season. Well, we're at the end of this week's recap, and you know what that means. It's time to pick this week's MVP. So, Garrett, who are you giving your MVP to this week?
Okay, I'm between a couple people here. Lydia getting the idol and avoiding targeting in that challenge. I think she's in a better position than it probably looks right now. Then there's Lex, just ultimate swing right now, and nobody's suspecting him. He's playing super solid middle game here. And then speaking of super solid middle game, Emily also super up there right now, but I'm not certain if she made the right decision. So you know what? I think I'm going to give it to Lydia right now because of that second idol. And I do think she'll be able to play that without worry from the idol nullifier, unless it's like a round that expires or something and it just happens. So I think now that Ben was voted out and she knows she's in a bad spot, she had the right instincts the first time. I'm biased towards idols, so I'm going to trust in her that she'll be able to pull that off one more time at least.
Well, speaking of Lydia, she was the audience pick for MVP last week as well. She's playing a very solid game and getting a second idol, super impressive. This week, I am going to end up giving my MVP to Emily. I think her ability to convince people that she's working with them, to get information, to then feed a plan to someone and then turn around and tell other people that that's the plan that's being counter opposed to what they're trying to do. It's so impressive the way she's able to get everyone on her side and like just convince everyone that she's working with them. It's so impressive.
Oh yeah, it really is.
Kudos to her.
It really is. I would have picked her too. I just have that slight bit of doubt about whether she made the right decision this time. So I kind of want to see how next round plays out for Emily, but I definitely think she's incredible how she's been playing.
Well, with that, Garrett, thank you so much for joining me this week to talk about this week's episodes. Audience, you can vote for your MVP. Just make sure you're following us on social media, either on Instagram or on Facebook. You can vote there for who you think this week's MVP should be. Also, like and subscribe to the channel. Click that bell, get those notifications. We have content dropping 5 days a week. We have our episodes dropping on Mondays and Thursdays. We have exit interviews Wednesdays and Saturdays, and of course your weekly recap every Sunday. Thank you everyone for tuning in, and we'll see you again next week.